time to listen to our chief guest. We have another very special person as our chief guest today. She is the Chief of Gender Equality and Social Inclusion Section at the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, UNESCAP. UNESCAP is the largest UN entity in the Asia-Pacific region with 53 member states and 9 associate members. She leads UNESCAP's regional programs on advancing gender equality and disability inclusive development in Asia-Pacific. She has over 20 years of rich experience with the United Nations at the country and the regional levels, covering a wide range of socio-economic issues. She worked with UNICEF and UNDP, focusing on policy development and capacity building that aim to empower women and young people as a key strategy for inclusive and sustainable development. She holds a master's degree in public policy from the Kennedy School of Government, Harvard University. Let me proudly invite the chief guest of today, Chief of Gender Equality and Social Inclusion Section, UNESCAP, Ms. Chai Chai. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Distinguished delegates, participants, ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted to join you in this summit. Today, we set off on an exciting journey that will take us through all 17 Sustainable Development Goals and consider the importance of MSMEs and their role in poverty reduction, inclusive and resilient development toward achieving the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Among us are thought leaders and change makers to create what promises to be rich and compelling debates on the issues of our time that matter the most to all of us. How can you, me, we together transform the world? So I will be providing an overview of the importance of SMEs, how they can help protect the environment and mitigate climate change, and passionate about human development, economic and social justice. I will also share with you some thoughts about the importance of our clarion call to leave no one behind and how we can support marginalized and disadvantaged groups through inclusive business. Yes. As you know, SMEs account for an overwhelming majority of economic activities in both developed and developing countries. In emerging market economies, SMEs are responsible for up to 45% of jobs and up to 1/3 of national GDP. A major part of the ASEAN economy, for example, consists of SMEs that account for between 89% and 99% of total establishments, and between 52% and 97% of total employment. In Asia and the Pacific region, SMEs contribute to about 17% of national GDP in low-income countries, to 40 to 50% in the higher income countries, such as Malaysia and Singapore. The critical contributions of SME to broad social economic objectives, including job creation and decent work opportunities, make them a strategic avenue for achieving the SDGs. Over the past 30 years, job creation in the private sector has contributed to a sharp reduction of the share of the population living below the poverty line, dropping from 52% to 22%. In emerging markets, 4 out of 5 new positions in the formal sector were created by SMEs. SMEs have been at the front line of COVID-19's economic ramifications, with many facing abrupt declines in demand and major disruptions to operations. In a survey conducted by ADB in September 2020, more than 35% of SMEs across 8 Asian countries reported a drop in domestic demand as their top challenge. These enterprises also reported temporary business closures, disruption in material supply, and low employee turnout as key challenges. SMEs provide job opportunities and livelihoods to many segments of the population, including low-skilled and marginalized groups, as well as rural and urban poor. This has strong impact in reducing inequality. However, the COVID-19 pandemic has disproportionately affected vulnerable and marginalized populations, including women and girls, young people, ethnic minorities, and migrants. An International Trade Center survey on COVID-19 impact among businesses in 136 countries has shown that nearly 62% of women-led small businesses have been strongly affected by the crisis, compared to just over half of the firms led by men. And women-owned businesses are 27% more likely not to survive the ongoing stronghold of the COVID pandemic. Next slide. SMEs are usually dependent on locally endowed natural resources. The design and operations of SMEs impact on various environment-related SDGs, such as SDG 6, 7, and 13. For example, SMEs support water and sanitation-related activities, providing water to local communities and improving water quality by reducing contamination, wiping out dumping activities, and limiting the release of dangerous residual materials. Next. Now let's take a look at the role of SMEs in contributing to the protection of our planet and our environment. The COVID-19 pandemic has shifted the focus of governments away from climate action. Yet, there are considerable opportunities for bringing together COVID-19 and the fight against climate change. The private sector can and should play a key role, alongside a long-term economic incentive for business to transition to alternative energy sources. SMEs have the potential to make vulnerable populations and households climate resilient. Given that they create employment for a large population in developing countries, SMEs can enhance capacities of households through stable and diversified incomes to help address the impacts of climate-induced shocks and stressors. Next slide. Many SMEs operate in energy-intensive sectors and have the potential to contribute to mitigation. An estimate of climate impact of SMEs show that the sectors with the largest volumes of greenhouse gas emissions were found in 3 sectors for which data were available, including agriculture, hunting, forestry and fishing, manufacturing and electricity, as well as gas and water supply. The numbers of SMEs active in these sectors were 88 million, 49 million, and 1 million, respectively. If informal businesses were added, the numbers were even higher. This demonstrates the scale as well as the role SME can play in greenhouse gas mitigation. Mitigation activities include reducing energy use by supporting a switch to energy-efficient approaches for lighting, buildings, and refrigeration, reducing emissions by supporting a switch to renewable energy sources, or improving water conservation by supporting behavioral change towards pollution and water use. Next slide. So what can SMEs do to fight climate change? Let's just look at some concrete actions. These are not the full list, but just some suggestions. It's important to develop guidelines, codes of conduct, or practice for operations and products that demonstrate commitment to care for health and the environment, creating a managerial committee or steering group that oversees the company's application of precaution, in particular, risk management in sensitive issues, and to create and maintain solid evidence base. Companies could support scientific research, including independent and public research on related issues, and work with national and international institutions concerned. The final suggestion I want to mention is to join industry-wide collaborative efforts to share knowledge on this issue and communicate this and other considerations in a proactive, early stage, and transparent manner to all stakeholders. Mechanisms such as multi-stakeholder meetings, workshop discussions, focus group discussions, public polls, combined with website, social media may be used, please. Having looked at the impacts of climate change and the environment, let's take a look at some of the implications for potentially vulnerable groups with great potential to be empowered by the growth of SMEs, including women and persons with disabilities. Next, I want to first mention women's entrepreneurship and give a quick overview. As you know, entrepreneurship is a key means through which women can both empower themselves and contribute to prosperous and inclusive growth. Diverse factors such as access to finance and technology, as well as cultural and social norms, all influence the barriers facing women entrepreneurs and whether they could succeed or expand their business. Research shows that the business owned by women are predominantly in agriculture and informal sectors, such as catering, tailoring, beauty, and food processing. The gender gap in mobile phone ownership as well as internet use remains high in the region. Also, legal and regulatory barriers across Asia and the Pacific impede women's ability to start business and expand their businesses. The COVID-19 pandemic has further exacerbated some of these challenges and risks, reversing the gains already made in advancing women's economic empowerment over the last decades. Next, SCAP's Catalyzing Women's Entrepreneurship Program applies an ecosystem approach to address these challenges I have just mentioned. It has been structured around 3 interconnected pillars of work. First, the policy and advocacy component of the program provides an overarching enabling platform at the country level in 6 target countries. Also, through the innovative financing pillar, we undertake activities aimed at leveraging public and private capital to pilot and scale up innovative financing models for women entrepreneurs. With the ICT pillar, we strengthen the capacities of women entrepreneurs to better use digital tools and platforms in managing their business. I'd like to highlight the importance of advocacy and policy. Gender-responsive policy and services are critical to create an enabling environment to support women entrepreneurs. For example, in Cambodia, we worked with the Ministry of Industry, Science, Technology, and Innovation to review the national SME policy and included specific provisions for women-owned or women-led SMEs. In Vietnam, we partnered with the Ministry of Planning and Investment to develop a one-stop portal on SMEs to especially cater to the specific needs of women entrepreneurs. Next. Now, I want to just share some thoughts on another vulnerable group, persons with disabilities, and how they may benefit from SMEs, especially through disability inclusive business, which integrates the disability concerns into business value chain, ranging from logistics, operations, procurement, to marketing and sales. Please. Next slide. The UN estimate of disability prevalence is about 15% in general population. Based on this, the populations of persons with disabilities in the Asia-Pacific region is estimated to be 690 million, close to 700 million. A number of factors are contributing to the increased number of persons with disabilities, such as population aging, disasters, and traffic accidents. Next slide. When we examine the labor market through a disability lens, the following three words are often used: unemployed, underemployed, and excluded. Persons with disabilities are approximately 2 to 6 times less likely to have a job than persons without disabilities. For those who have a job, up to 3/4 of the persons with disabilities work in the informal economy. Next slide. There are tremendous benefits of promoting disability inclusive businesses, not only in creating job opportunities for persons with disabilities, but also for economic growth. Let's take a look at these benefits. Exclusion of persons with disabilities, according to the recent study, in the labor market, it can incur huge loss of GDP, estimated at about 7% in the Asia-Pacific region. By promoting disability inclusive business, profit and tax revenue will be enhanced, while social welfare costs may go down, contributing to economic growth and inclusive development of a country. Entrepreneurs with disabilities know the needs of persons with disabilities and are able to translate that insight into viable products and services and develop a niche market such as inclusive tourism. Having their own businesses or jobs bring out pride and dignity for persons with disabilities and enable them to contribute their unique talents and skills. In this regard, I encourage all companies, big or small, to do your part to hire persons with disabilities or to engage businesses run by entrepreneurs with disabilities in supply chains. And of course, government should adopt special policies and provide special tax code for inclusive businesses to encourage support for vulnerable groups. So we can see that through just the examples of supporting women entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs with disabilities, these vulnerable groups, disadvantaged groups, should not be only perceived as a recipient of services or consumers, because they can also become major change agents to our businesses and bring enormous contributions to our economic and social development. Next slide, please. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, coming to the conclusion of my presentation, I want to just mention that even with a heightened global commitment to their growth, SMEs still face multiple challenges, including limited access to finance, a lack of capacity and knowledge, particularly regarding business development and insufficient marketing and strategic management skills. Unleashing the potential of SMEs for the SDGs require transforming policies as well as systemic changes in the way financial markets and institutions operate. This will reduce the constraints SMEs face in accessing financial resources and catalyze the growth of informal, micro, and small businesses into formal ones. And the impact from this would be multiple and far-reaching, filling additional economic growth, generating further employment opportunities, and empowering vulnerable groups such as women and persons with disabilities. I'd like to congratulate the organizers of this summit for leading the way in recognizing the importance of SMEs and their contributions to SDGs. As we weather and ride out the COVID-19 pandemic, we stand ready together with the UN family and our other committed partners to support governments, civil society, and the private sector in our region to build back better, stronger, and more gender equal economies and societies where no one will be left behind. I thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for that very informative session. We all have a lot to do towards creating a better world. Looking forward to working with you in the future as well. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
With this, we have come to the end of our opening session. We'll be back after a short break with a session on unlocking the potential of MSMEs for SDGs. See you after the break.